Okay, Coach Bill Zadick here at USAW HQ. We're chatting a little bit, maybe a month post Worlds. Another successful World Championship for you. Back-to-back team titles, your third overall, but pretty special to have back-to-back team titles, especially this year with
Yes, it is.
an improved depth of field too, with all the countries being added back in. But from your perspective, what are the factors that are leading to this unprecedented success you're seeing in the U.S. At the world level?
Man, there are many factors. Sustained success is consistency, right? And it boils down to trying to inject consistency from top to bottom in our program. And I think our leadership has done a great job. Obviously, our RTCs are a very powerful and valuable constituency. The personal coaches and the athletes' opportunity to focus on Olympic styles of wrestling in an environment where they have great training partners and great intelligence in their coaching staffs has been a powerful asset. And from our national staff perspective, I've been fortunate and blessed to be around great coaches from the time that I was an athlete, and having Bruce Burnett and then Kevin Jackson as the national coaches, and working for others and working for Bruce, and then becoming the head coach and going through various roles at USA Wrestling. I've just been blessed to have a lot of opportunity and see different leadership styles and try to bring the best of all of those to bear. But yeah, there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of things, and in anyone that's involved in successful organization, whether it's sports or academics or business, there are a lot of people pushing and pulling on that wagon or train to make it successful. And so there's we're fortunate. There's a lot of really exciting young talent that continues to grow up at our grassroots and our elite track developmental levels. There's advancements in technology that have made information more readily available, and I definitely believe that that's a factor on the global stage of watching the improvement of our sport and how quickly adjustments are being made and how early athletes are becoming successful, and those are all contributing factors. Certainly the climate of wrestling in the United States and the improvement on the women's side and the men's side and the collegiate realm is all improving what our American wrestling system looks like, and making more and better opportunities for everyone. So a lot. There's a lot going on.
To that point a little bit, are wrestlers getting better at a younger age now, and compared to you have that perspective, right? Of how it's trended over the years. Are we getting better younger? Are we the technical levels? Are they improved?
Yeah, I hope so. There's always the old school ideology of like how hard things have been, and they are, right? I don't want to make light of that. I don't want to devalue the generations and the tradition that have allowed for the opportunities that we're seeing now. So I think that the greatest teams in U.S. history, are always talked about. The 72, 76 teams, the 80s teams, and the 90s teams get talked about on the men's side a lot, and they were amazing. And what those people did have built a foundation that has allowed for what we're seeing now. I do think technology has helped people advance quicker. When even in my own career as a competitor, I used to carry a camera with me to video my own matches, and it was necessary to do that in order to have the ability to make adjustments and see what you're doing as quickly as possible. And now every match that's wrestled on the face of the planet is almost videoed, so anyone can have access to that. And so we know that there's talent, and we know that there's intelligence all over the world. And so as we have access to that information, we can make adjustments quicker and better, technically, tactically. So I think those are real factors.
From your standpoint, from the coaching point of view, how does the U.S. team compare to the other top powers in your mind? The Irans, the Russias. Like, how are we different in our approach compared to the other countries?
That's a very good question. Clearly, I have experience from being around other countries and being in those countries, but really don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So that's a tough question to answer. I know that we strive to put people and process at the front of what we're doing, and then add consistency to that, and that's we try to use those as guiding principles. If we take care of our people, and there's always adjustment, refinement in our process, but adhere to the ideals of what is best for people, then they're going to elevate our program, and they certainly are. I'm blessed and grateful to be involved and have a part in it, but yeah, there's multiple factors, but I really believe in people and process, and I think that's what's helping us.
Let me ask it in a different way too then. So with Iran, you hear a lot about their underhooks, right? With Russia, their style's more laid back, and then they go. It seems like, the Asian countries have different styles. We're sort of branded as this hard-nosed, just grind you out sort of a style. Do you agree with all of that, or do you think that we're more dynamic than we get credit for?
Yeah, I do think that those stereotypes exist, out of merit, essentially. Eastern Europeans and Russia and the former Soviet republics, more of a reputation of technical and tactical focus. We've been kind of branded, in a lot of it is, I think, our scholastic systems. Folk style, we all know, is a very tough, challenging style of wrestling, and it certainly elevates us in a lot of ways. And so that comes from that. And I think, I mentioned the 70s teams. I think back to those teams, and when we had 9-minute matches, we had, 3-minute periods, and we've watched video, we've seen, talked to our coaches that have impacted us on how, sometimes it'd be close matches, or they'd be a little bit ahead or a little bit behind at the 3 and 4 and 5-minute mark, and then at the 8 and 9-minute mark, gap really opens up. And I think a lot of that is, American exceptionalism, the philosophy that our country post-World War II was really elevated on, hard work, and anybody can succeed if they put their mind to it and work really hard. And certainly folk style system contributes a lot to that. Honestly, I strive to have no style. I strive to, as a philosophy, is bring everybody's intellect and intelligence to bear in our program, in our athletes and our coaches, and we have a very diverse group of people that can contribute. And so I like the idea of not having a style, other than the world knows that we're going to be offensive and we're going to be aggressive and that we're going to be a threat and we're going to be a handful to deal with. Hopefully we're moving that direction.
You think about this 2023 squad that just won the world title. When you think about them, are there any defining characteristics that you saw with this team that stood out to you, or anything that distinguished them or helped separate them from the world field, or even U.S. teams in the past?
I guess I haven't given a whole lot of thought, other than the strength of our program has always been our individuals, and each one of them brings their own character, their own thought, their own creativity into our program, and I really think that rising tide raises all ships. And this year, we had a different team, right? We had 6 new faces from a world championship team from 1 year ago. And so that, could have been, it was very interesting. It was interesting as a result in our trials, but we believe in our individuals and know that they're working really hard. They're focused on what they need to do to improve, of course, we're looking at the rest of the world and analyzing what's being done in our sport successfully and being prepared for that, but also being of a mentality that you're competing with yourself. Am I challenging myself to be better at the end of practice than I was when I walked into practice? Am I better when I come into the room today than I was yesterday? And I think all of our athletes and all of our personal coaches do that very successfully. And clearly it has made our team successful.
You mentioned the 6 new members this year compared to last year, but you won team titles both years. How do you have such turnover on a team yet see the same results, if not better results this year compared to last year? Depends on how you frame it up,
Yeah. I mean, obviously we had a record-setting performance last year, and you think, wow, this team is really solid, and it would be interesting to have those other programs involved. And this year they were involved, and those athletes, maybe we didn't have named countries, but we had the whole world participating, and we have a bunch of new faces. So I think you still stay pretty, people and process oriented. We know what it takes. We've been watching what's going on around the world, and we try to give them the best information possible so that they can do the most that they can do with it. And as far as the changing faces in the program, that they're really not new people. Maybe they're new to the starting lineup, but they've always been around. These guys, from the time they were youth. And so hopefully it speaks to the consistency of the American wrestling system and what USA Wrestling is doing, what our state leaders are doing at the grassroots level, from introductory wrestling through our U15, U17, U20, and U23 teams, with what's happening in Fargo, all the way up. That's just edifying our senior program, and it's adding depth and consistency. And I think that's what Rich Bender, what our executive team, our executive board, what our leadership wants. It's what we as coaches in all 3 styles, I think that's what we're striving for. And so hopefully it's reflective of that. We'd like to see it continue for a long time before we start patting ourselves on the back.
Sure. So yeah, this idea of competitive depth, of you have multiple world medalists, world champions, Olympic medalists, Olympic champions not making the team this year. Two-part question. What does that say about the depth and what you're striving to build in the U.S.? And then 2, as a coach, how do you, as the leader of this program, how do you adjust, or do you have to adjust when someone who has been the person for so many years winning world and Olympic medals, how do you have to adjust when they're not that person anymore, or they're not the number 1 on the team, I would say?
Yeah, well, I do think it speaks to the depth. I think it speaks to the readiness of our country and what people are doing. on a day-to-day basis, that they're competitive at that level. And it also, I think, is reflective of where international wrestling is. I mean, we're splitting hairs, right? We're not trying to make jumps like this. We've made that jump from our grassroots up to, making elite teams and that stuff. And so sometimes it's maturity, sometimes it's perspective. It could be smaller factors like injury or some other influencer. But I do think it speaks to the readiness of the national team and the depth behind that. So it's that's something that consistency, I guess, is something that I strive for, but I'm proud of too, and thankful for. So that's really important. I think you're always going to tailor things specifically to the individuals. There's always some guiding principles and philosophy that drive our program, and then there's flexibility to tailor things to each specific athlete's needs, and we try to do that. And our staff, we have great staff. We have great staff from our administrative leadership with Rich, of course, Cody Bickley, our high performance director, all of our administrative staff, Jamie McNabb and Meredith Cease, and my personal staff with Coach Russell and Coach Jackson, and then James Green, and now Zach Esposito. We've looked for those types of people that really are people-oriented and that, of course, have a high level of experience and knowledge, but all of that's really important. And so, I guess I think those, when you're trying to be successful at a level that's that competitive, a 1% is a major difference maker, and so those components become very critical.
Looking at the process to actually make the team, do you feel like we're really dialed in on the process of U.S. Open, Final X, what have you, to flesh out our best team members? And honestly, it seems like we're at the point where if you make the team, you're a world champion contender at this point. I mean, do you believe we're at that sort of stage?
I think that's the expectation we're trying to develop. Mm-hmm. I know when I was a kid watching from afar, that was the expectation. And 74/76 kilo is a great example of that over a 50-year period, right? You have going back to like Gable Peterson, Wayne Wells, Stan Desick. Stan loses to, then Lee Kemp comes along, then Dave Schultz comes along, and then Kenny Monday comes along, and so it's like this period of where you have these people that are exceptionally talented, but the challenge before them, they rise to that challenge. And so in our process, we definitely want to incentivize the behaviors that we desire in our teams. Medal performances, because that's what those individuals want, or that's what they're striving for. At this level, they've committed their lives and their family and everybody around them to this achievement. And so it's we want to incentivize that. We want to help them in every way we can to achieve that mark. And there's always ebbs and flows. There's always changes because of the climate of wrestling or climate of sport, or heck, in the last several years we've seen major things in society and global just socioeconomic things that are major influencers. So we're always have to keep an open mind and make adjustments to understand what's best for the most of our people, to be the most inclusive in that process, to allow people to enter that process, and then hopefully it's incentivizing them in a way that they're going to identify themselves, right? You and I or some executive, elite isn't picking people. We're creating a very holistic process, and these are the things that are rewarded in this process, and that refines people's efforts and focus.
Talk about, when you first took over, sort of the state of the program and then how it has developed into what it is now. That's a pretty, sweeping question, but, just talk me a little bit through this journey that you've been on since taking over and how we've gotten to the point where we're now consistently, atop the best countries in the world from a medal standpoint, whereas before, I can think less than 15 years ago we didn't even win a medal, or we're at that stage. So how have we come so far?
Well, it's certainly not easy, and there's been a lot of work, and it wasn't an overnight thing. So I guess when I think about my own experience in time through international wrestling, from the time I started competing, in my late college years in the mid-90s, when Bruce Burnett was the coach, and then through the early 2000s when KJ was the coach, and then when I retired and Zeke became the coach, and then after that Bruce and now myself. There's been a lot of change and a lot rules changes, and going back to the years from 2000, but especially 2004 to 2008, or even 2012, when you're 2 out of 3 periods, just a very poor rules structure for incentivizing action and risk taking. So it was difficult, and we didn't have great performances then, and it was dramatically different than a lot of our sports history prior to that, and hopefully a lot of our sports history since then. So 13 being a monumental shift in rules changes that made things a lot better. At the same time, Rich, in his vision of changing administrative opportunities, that created the RTCs, and when Zeke Jones was the coach, that was a monumental change. And early on, that allows athletes to have the consistency to focus on training full time, as opposed to generations before, where in order to have a livable wage and support yourself or support a family, if you're young married, family person, you had to be an assistant coach, and so then you're divided. And now that changed that, and so it allows those athletes to have the opportunity to be around great coaching, to have great training partners, and be focused on this monumental task of winning world and Olympic medals. Those are big things, but those things, it's not like a light switch that flipped on overnight. It took some time to build, and those first few years, there were just a handful of RTCs that were really functional, and the power of the RTC has not only impacted USA Wrestling, it impacts our NCAA pipeline as well, and there's a long history of strong RTCs supporting their collegiate programs, right? I would say Ohio State is a great example. They had the strongest RTC. They had 10 senior level athletes, postgraduates, and several of them national team and world team members. I believe that at one point they had 5 world team members training there the year that they won the NCAA tournament. And so I think those things, it's a building process that is intended to create a symbiotic relationship that elevates everybody. So from those days when we had a handful of RTCs. We went from, you know, I think the first year we had maybe 6, and then it kind of got to about 12. And I believe last year we had over 60 registered RTCs. And so not all of them at the same level, of course, but what it shows is the expansion of opportunity for people to do the thing that they love, for that regional training center to help the collegiate athlete elevate themselves sooner, which then makes them more efficient when they transition into full-time or part-time, right? Now we've had, over the last quad, we've had several of our world team and Olympic team members that are underclassmen, and not just making teams, but winning medals also. And that's a really exciting thing, and I think that shows the health and the effectiveness of those programs.
From your standpoint, are there any specific keys to sustaining success over time, to whether it be for a program or even for a wrestler individually? Like, how do you keep consistency over time in your approach?
I think it's a real innovative thing. I think there's always adjustment every day, every year, and there's new dynamics. And even though our rules have been consistent since 2013 until now, we're looking at a decade of this rule structure. There's always new interpretations that influence, and staying on the front end of that, and other factors that influence our climate, you know, and being able to make adjustments to again, I guess I'm guided by our athletes, our people, and our personal coaches and my staff and our administrative staff around here, that the things that are influencing those people, they're going to let you know, and if we listen, then we can make better adjustments. And not that I'm the guy making them all, because I have my own bosses, I have my own leadership, and they're doing that for me as well. And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing that downline too. And so in order to have consistency, there's also adjustment and change.
Let's go back to 2017 Paris. You know, this is you're fresh on the job, relatively speaking. You know, and you come out and you win the team title. It comes down to the final match, all the drama. Kyle Snyder, Zadick in the last match. You know, I think on that last day we might have had the 3 guys in the finals, 4 guys going for medals. It was a great, you know, just sort of moment in time for U.S. wrestling. When you think back to that week, that team, that experience, like, what comes to your head? What feelings do you get?
I get goosebumps. Yeah, it was really exciting. I can't remember if I've said this in other interviews about that year, but the behind the scenes story is almost more amazing and unbelievable than you would even imagine. I hesitate to talk about some of the details, because after the fact it almost looks too fairy tale, like I'm you know, retroactively cultivating a story to fit the details instead of reality. But in this case, it really was. I mean, it was amazing. Of course we had a great team, we had a great staff, but in the immediate time frame, we're at acclimation, and of course this matchup between Kyle Snyder and Zadick had been building these 2, you know, phenoms, prodigies, you know, or prodigies, excuse me, for a couple of years, right? Ever since they both were on the scene. And so you have, you know, this young, exciting Russian and this young, exciting American that are winning everything, and it just looks like they're on a collision course. And of course, everybody's getting super excited because they want to see that kind of a matchup. And also leading our countries on this same thing, the same collision course. And a couple of weeks before the competition, we had an off day. We're having a little meal, relaxing time with the team, and Kyle said to me, "Hey, Coach, wouldn't it be cool if the whole thing came down to our team versus the Russians and me and Sadulayev decided the whole thing?" And I just, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. He goes, "I hope it does." And so that's, I mean, whatever. That's a very fairy tale kind of a thing. But when you think about what it actually takes for somebody to think that way, let alone say that in reality, there was no cameras around. It was not social media. It wasn't, anybody promoting anything. It was just him and I having a small conversation. So it's a totally pure thing. And for somebody to have that kind of courage, especially at that age, right? And Kyle was a very young man at that time. He was 22 years old. To have that kind of perspective, that kind of desire, it really stems from his own love of what he does and the hunger for challenge and to test himself. That's pretty remarkable. It's pretty unique. Fortunately, right now, we're in a period where we have a lot of those folks. And so it's pretty amazing, right? And then the last, that, you talk about the final day of the tournament, having Jordan as one of our team leaders and a guy that's been doing it and showing it, and he was in a spot in his life where he's been probably the foremost image of wrestling in the entire world, not just the United States, but in the entire world at that time, but didn't realize his goals at the Olympic Games, and now is wanting to show himself as hey, I'm still the guy. And so and he's competing against a returning world champion in the finals. So both of those scenarios really were the same. It was an all or none deal for both athletes, or all four athletes, you might say, from the other team's perspective too. And so, in Burroughs' match, it was just a back and forth. He would score, and then Sabalov would score back, and then Jordan would raise the bar again and score again, and just this back and forth. And I mean, talk about emotional roller coaster. Yeah, it was just really incredible. It's it's fairy tale-esque. It was movie, type Disneyland kind of, I mean, he scores with a minute left, and then he comes back and scores again just to ice it with seconds. And then Kyle in a very similar back and forth battle with, these two amazingly exciting people. That, I mean, of course, that set the tone for the quad and still, and it's still an exciting and amazing anticipation of those matchups. And so, yeah, it was pretty incredible, pretty exciting from a performance outlook. Also, I think that one of the biggest blessings that I've had is just the people that I get to be around. They're exceptional wrestlers, but they're really good people. They're really fun to be around, and not just fun. They're rewarding to be around, which is different. It's not, rainbows and butterflies. I feel like it's adding value to my life every every time I get to be around those guys, and even more so when we're around each other as a group. When I get to be around one of them, it's amazing. When you add to that, it doesn't add to the experience, it multiplies the experience. And so I think a lot of that is the reason the teams are successful, because you can take one or two people out and another new person, seemingly new, is in for the year. But in order for them to break into that, they have to have those things also. And then the rest of them rub off on them too, and so it just works to elevate each other. But that year was very exciting. Very exciting.
We've talked a lot about consistency today. Some people might not realize, but there's two guys who have consistently been on these World Championship teams going back to 2017. One, Kyle Snyder, you mentioned, the other, Zane Rutherford. Very different journeys, very different paths, but they both now have gold medals, which has to be really cool for you as a coach. Zane won this year, after taking second last year, and I think it was his first world team in 2017, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
But Kyle's going into 2017 as the dude, right? He's won the Olympics, he's won the Worlds, the youngest American to ever do it, and now he's, he's medaled at every World Championships or Olympics he's competed in over the last 9 years, right? Mm-hmm. Just speaking to those two guys and what they have meant to the program and consistency over time, just what's your take on that? And I think Zane goes under the radar quite a bit, actually, compared to someone like Kyle who has medals year after year after year. But Zane's there too, right? He's there too. What's your thoughts on that?
It's hard to describe, honestly, because we do have a great group. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about referencing the team, and we have 6 new people, and how does that, and you're talking about depth and consistency, but every individual one of them, I feel like, is the backbone of the program. So if you talk about Zane, I feel that way about Zane. If you talk about Kyle, I feel that way about Kyle. If you talk about almost any one of these guys that is competing, not just as a world team member or even a national team member, but somebody that's competing on the senior level, man, we do a lot of work with these guys. We get to know them. We care about them. They impact all of our lives, and they influence all of us. And so Zane, when he made the team in 17, now, he was a 3-time NCAA champ. We know how good Zane is. I was a developmental coach when Zane made a cadet world team and was a cadet world champion. And so we have a lot of history and time together where I know his capability. And I thought he was capable of winning then in 2017. And obviously he didn't that year. But it was a little bit of a heartache, That's kind of, for all coaches, that's the coach's curse, is no matter how well you do, unless everybody tacks and pins everybody, your heart still breaks for the ones that don't reach what you believe and what they have worked and dedicated their lives to. So, and then, a very challenging path, and it's maybe because it's more towards the median size of the average person on the planet. Those 65, 74, those middle weights are always super deep. Not that there's any lack of depth anywhere else, but it's very competitive. It's very competitive, and so he's had anybody that makes the team in those spots, in any of these spots, they're going to have a major challenge to come through, and they're going to have to rise to that, and that's going to give them depth. And Zane's exhibited that. Last year when he was in the World Finals and was silver, I felt like he was ready to win, and got caught in some areas. We certainly got better. Got caught in some areas where maybe the momentum of the match kind of got away from him before he really could get rolling. And I think given a moment to, reset, the outcome still might have been different, but but it wasn't. And we're big boys here, and we play the cards we're dealt, and that's what we had to do. And so he went home, and his personal coaches went home, and the NLWC does a great job with their athletes, and Coach Cody and Zane. You know, I know it means a lot to him, and to watch him progress and come back and then win and have the success against a very quality field at 70 kilo this year, and some really exciting names. And it's going to be interesting to see what the rest of the world does, where they matriculate, you know, to 74 or 65. But man, he just did a great job, and I'm very excited for him. And Kyle, of course, you almost don't talk a whole lot about, because you wouldn't stop talking, right? You said it all. He's the youngest ever world champion in U.S. history, the youngest ever Olympic champion in men's freestyle in U.S. history, and has medaled at every championship that he's been to. And I know you meant senior level, but also in developmental, going back to that, right? Amazing consistency. And some of the similarities between the two of them, obviously both of them are that backbone of our team. And both of them have given a lot to our team and our program. And they... from an individual characteristic standpoint, they have different personalities. They have different skills and different things. But one thing that they do very well is they make ordinary look extraordinary. And I've heard people reference that in the reverse. Like, they make extraordinary look ordinary because they're doing this. But I'm telling you, these guys are such grounded, rock-solid persons. Just their inner personality and their people and their character of who they are, that it's bedrock. And that's why they are who they are. And that could be said for almost everybody in our lineup. But it really, when you ask about those two guys specifically and the correlation of what are their differences, what are their similarities, man, these guys, they do it right, and they do it right a lot. And it's certainly, they've made major impacts for us.
Let's switch gears a little bit. The Olympic year, we're here. It's the Olympic year, right? We've completed the World Championships. We're on that path. You know, we've got 4 of the 6 weights qualified. There's a lot of pressure with that, on top of the pressure of just the team selection process and making the team. And from your standpoint, just talk me through the Olympic year, what all it entails, how it's different. Like, how does it compare to a typical year?
Yeah, well, there's some structural differences. Here there's only 2. And then there are other ranking of other events that bear towards ranking, the Continental Championships being the most significant. So that's one metric. The other is each World Championship year we're required to wrestle in our Continental in order to qualify. There's no performance marker, you just have to enter. At the Olympic Games, it's a limited bracket, and since I think 2008, you've had to qualify, and that number has progressively gotten smaller. So in Tokyo in 2021 and now in Paris, we'll be at a 16 athlete bracket in all 3 styles. So the first 5 of those spots come from the World Championships. The top 5 placers. So the 2 finalists, the 2 bronze medals, and then this year a new qualification procedure was the 2 fifth placers had to wrestle, and the winner qualifies their country for the Olympic Games. So that is the first 5. The next ones, you get the 2 finalists from Continental Championships. Then you get the top 3 from a world qualifier. So if their country doesn't have their spots qualified, everybody will be gearing towards this qualifier. So that those factors are different than a world championship year, and they add a lot to it. Plus our trials procedure that we, each country runs their own trials procedures, but we're navigating that around one of the biggest influencers, which is our collegiate season, that we know will have several competitive athletes that are wrestling in the collegiate season that will also be vying for spots on our Olympic teams. And so there's a lot of different factors that the calendar kind of gets a little bit crowded, and so you're trying to evaluate where is their flexibility, where do you give, where do you get the opportunity and the training opportunity with our team members, meaning not that we have this preconceived pick team, but I'm talking everybody that's on the senior level, right? We go to the U.S. Open, there's close to 400 athletes competing in men's freestyle. How do we get the most opportunity with most of those 400 people? And how do we give them the best information so that they can be using it as effectively and as efficiently throughout that process? So there's a lot of challenges in an Olympic year. And then you're also funneling down to 6 weights, which is the biggest indigestion in my career, really, is talking about all these good people that we've discussed, and then thinking that we already don't bring everybody that we love and care about and deserve it when we have 10 weights. So then we're going to go down to 6, and we're going to have to leave others at home. That's really hard, really challenging emotionally. And but we got to do something, right? So we have to celebrate the opportunity that we have. We have to make the most of that opportunity, and almost in a way, for the people that won't go, there's another level of accountability and responsibility. Man, we need to make this as best as possible. We want to honor everybody. We want to honor our families and our training partners and our coaches and these people that challenged us to move us forward and make this team great.
I was talking with Kyle earlier this week, and he said something to the effect of just winning that Olympic gold medal, being an Olympic champion. It means more to more people. To maybe not in the moment the actual achievement, but just the legacy of that is so powerful to him, and it's exciting to him. For you, when you think about it, I mean, we get to take 6 athletes to the Olympic Games, and they go through this whole process that's more difficult to get to this tournament than any other tournament. And then the field, of course, every person in the field is going to be a contender, right? It's just so tough. There's got to be like the reward as a coach, like to see someone get through there, achieve that goal, and get that moment. What does that mean to you? How does that excite you as you embark on this? Definitely going to be an exhausting, tough year, but there is that at the end of the road. Yeah,
it is. It's very hard to quantify in a real, relatable way. I've been fortunate to have a handful of those experiences, and being with athletes when they've won, and being involved in their preparation. And as you asked the question based on Kyle's words, it's the pinnacle, right? People that aren't the nerds about wrestling, that don't love high crotches and single legs like you and I might love them, they still are excited about the Olympic Games, right? They get excited about that. So it's the thing that everybody in the world knows, and that adds a lot to it. And you know, the nature of it being every 4 years only, and there's fewer opportunities to create that experience. All of those add to it. All of those add to it. And now, you know, and especially in the last, well, probably more than 30 years, but, you know, I think I don't know, I guess I in the 70s I was just a little kid, right? But I know what the image of those Olympic champions meant to me as a youth, and I didn't watch the tournament. And it wasn't until years later that I dug up videos and was actually able to watch the performance of the stuff. But the legacy of this accomplishment impacted me, and it drove me in a lot of ways. And so being involved in those opportunities now is amazing. I've just been fortunate to have a lot of great coaches. My father being the biggest influence in my wrestling career and in my life outside of that as well. Several other coaches that always impressed upon me, especially as, I mean, they did it by example. So my father, Dennis Campbell, Floyd Vaughn, Jabby Young, Mark Sprague, of course Coach Gable, and then all the coaches I've already mentioned on the senior level. But those ones in your youth are really influencing you, right? In just how it works as being a parent. Your words are important, but not as important as your actions. So I was very fortunate to watch how these men lived, and honestly, all their wives too. My mom was a powerful influence, but watching how they treated people was a powerful example to me, and to our family, my brother and my sisters, and I learned more about performance in achieving these high things where there's lots of pressure and lots of anxiety and lots of external, you know, if you want to call it legacy. I think if you focus too much on that, it just invites a bunch of weight and pressure and anxiety on you. And watching how they treated people as individuals, I guess, gives me a lot of groundedness. And I mean, I get super excited too, but when I can be calm internally in those moments to help Kyle Snyder win an Olympic championship, to help David Taylor, Jordan Burroughs, Gable Steveson, I mean, it's difficult to quantify, but it's an amazing experience. It's an amazing experience. Yeah, it's remarkable because I know that not only did they impact themselves and all of their family, and everyone that's ever been in their sphere of influence feels pride in what just happened, but there's kids and people that are watching that they might never meet or know, and that's influencing those people too. That's an amazing realization when you don't think about that in the moment, but in the days after you do. And so it's pretty awesome to be a part of some of that.
Let's end on a fun, maybe not fair question. Just thinking back over your coaching career, what's your favorite memory or memories? Anything that stands out to you that?
I mean, the performances are awesome. It's not just about the medal and getting your hand raised, but it's the realization of all this effort, and those are. So it's. But honestly, the funnest things are, and I can't really think of one specifically. It's the behind the scenes stuff when we're sitting around talking and laughing. The enjoyment of the interaction of these relationships is by far the biggest reward and the most fun. It's the most fun. I mean, now when it gets coupled with the performance that you desire, then it just multiplies. But if you had to throw one of those away, you'd throw away the performance for sure.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Appreciate it.